Hi, I'm Bill Snodgrass, and in this episode of The World Around Us, we're doing photosynthesis, and I would argue that photosynthesis is probably the most important topic in biology, maybe. I might argue that. I might change my mind, but for now I'm saying, for this video, I'm saying photosynthesis is the most important topic in biology, and here's why. So if I'm going to make that claim, I probably ought to define what photosynthesis is. Photosynthesis is a process that takes place in the autotrophs, in the chloroplast of plant cells, and in that process produces sugar and oxygen. And now the reason I say that photosynthesis is probably the most important thing in biology today, at least for this video, is because of that. Because it produces sugar, which is the fundamental, the glucose is the monomer for all of the carbohydrates, so all the sugars and the starches in plants. And those are the things that we eat. And the things that we eat those things. And so because, I might have enjoyed eating once in a while. And the other thing is it produces oxygen. Oxygen is a byproduct of the process, but it produces oxygen and that, breathing. So for those two reasons, eating and breathing, for today, for this video, photosynthesis is the most important for this video. Most important thing about biology, at least for this video. So what do you need to know about photosynthesis? What do you need to know about photosynthesis? As a human in the world, roaming around amongst all of the trees and the plants and the grass, and you should know at least two things. Carbon dioxide goes in, oxygen goes out. If you know those two things, you're probably going to be able to be an electrical engineer and be just fine. If you're trying to pass a biology class, you may need to know a little bit more, and we're going to go into some of the other things that you need to know. Besides taking in carbon dioxide, the process of photosynthesis also takes in sunlight, and it also takes in water. So water, light, and carbon dioxide go in. Water, light, and carbon dioxide are the reactants that goes into the photosynthesis process, the reactants of the process. Now, some people will say light's not really a reactant because it's not, matter. For the purposes of this, at least for this video, the things that go in, we're going to call those reactants. The things that go in are light, water, and carbon dioxide. The light comes from the sun, or those little glow bulbs, the grow bulbs, you can, but let's say the sunlight comes in, and sunlight comes in an entire spectrum of colors. The photosynthesis process doesn't need the green or the yellow. It's like, nah, we'll just reflect those. Hence, chlorophyll, the pigment in the chloroplast, is green. It reflects the yellows and the greens, and all the other spectrum, all the other frequencies come in. Light is a quantity of energy. You can view it as a particle that's traveling in a wave, or a wave of particles. So the energy comes in from the sun, and it gets converted into some other things. We're going to talk about that in just a second. And that energy ultimately ends up in producing the sugar that becomes the monomer for the cellulose and the cell walls and everything else that goes on after that. So three things go in: light, water, carbon dioxide. Leaving, we'll call those the products, leaving the photosynthesis process on the far outside, we're going to have oxygen and sugar in a form of, and that sugar becomes the monomer for all of the stuff, the cellulose that makes the plant walls, and the starches and the food, and all the sugars and things that goes on from there. Hence, oxygen and sugar coming out. I like to eat and I like to breathe. Or maybe it's breathe and eat, can't remember. But I like to do those two things, and photosynthesis allows me to do so. All right, we're going to have to look a little closer in. Look at the light reaction. This goes on the inside of the chloroplast. That's it goes inside the chloroplast. The light reactions, that's where the water goes in. Now inside the chloroplast, we have these things called thylakoids, and the thylakoids stack up, and then around the thylakoids is stuff called stroma, and then let's call the stroma outside. It's going to be like an alphabet soup if you start looking into it. you've got some phosphates out there and some electrons out there, and you got all these carbons and things running around outside the thylakoids out in here, and that's where the Calvin cycle takes place. The Calvin cycle, known also as the light-independent reactions or the dark reactions. So the light reactions, light-dependent reactions going on over here. In order to put that oxygen out, which goes, we like to breathe, take that oxygen out, in order to get that out, we have to process some things, and the purpose over here is to create these pieces of energy that will drive the Calvin cycle. So the water and the light comes in to the light reaction, and we're trying to put energy over here. We want to do that in the form of adenosine triphosphate. The adenosine triphosphate, it's an adenosine, which is there's a thing, and I made a whole video on it. Check it out. And then that goes over here. Also, we've got all these electrons running around. We need to do something. We need to get those back over to here and stuff. So we want to capture these electrons with this other molecule. So we're going to talk a little bit about this oxygen thing. Water comes in, H2O, and inside the light reaction, so the light reaction is like, we need some electrons. We got to do something and make this, we're going to take this and make it, we need some electrons. And he goes, hey, you water, come over here. I want your electrons. And the water's like, you can't have my electrons. And so then the plant's like, I'll tell you what, kick those hydrogen off. We'll take the hydrogen electrons and you can just beat it. And oxygen's like, okay. So the oxygen, the water breaks apart, leaving the two hydrogens and the oxygen. And then those hydrogens, they get their electrons robbed. So now we have the hydrogen ions and the electrons that are ready to be used. And then we have the oxygen out there. Then another water gets broken. The two oxygens come together and form O2. And then the cell's like, what are you still hanging out for? We're done. Get out of here. And the oxygen's like, I can leave? And they go, yeah, we don't need you. Go away. So the oxygen heads out. Oxygen hits the road. It's out of there in the form of O2. So two waters come in, get broken up. The two oxygens get together. Whoop, they leave. And then all the protons and electrons get used. Whoop, they leave, at least for this video. Whoop, they leave. And the other reactions. The other reactions are, there's out in the soup, we got these adenosine diphosphates. And these phosphates, and they're just out there hanging out. And we've got this thing, an electron carrier called the NADP positive. It's positively charged, it's an ion. So those electrons, if I take those electrons that I took off the water, take the electrons, jam them onto the NADP, it becomes NADPH, which is that down here. So like the thylakoid sitting there and goes, you, come here. So ADP and the phosphate says, I'm going to jam you guys together. I'm going to make adenosine triphosphate. And they're like, okay, we'll do that. So the light reaction uses the power of the sun to create these electrons and hydrogen ions and to put the phosphate on to the ADP. Now I'm going to stop at this point and say, I'm kind of like going to liberties here with the personification of the process, trying to make it a little more simpler. I'm sure there's some very smart people out there going, oh my gosh, this guy, just roll with me on this. This is like an introduction thing. Whoop, they leave, at least for this video. Whoop, they leave, roll with me on this. So we're going to keep going. So we put these guys together, we send them out into the alphabet soup because there's all these things out here in the stroma that need to be put together so that we can create the sugar. Sugar's way over there. There's the sugar. So we got to create that. So there's some carbons and there's some hydrogens and all that, all the things that go into glucose. All those pieces are out in the alphabet soup. And that's what happens in the Calvin cycle. So in the Calvin cycle, these pieces, the ADP, so the phosphate bond, there's 3 phosphates there. And as you jam the phosphates on, it takes a lot of energy to jam that third one on. When it gets over here, that third one breaks off, releasing the energy, and the Calvin cycle runs out in the stroma, out in I'm calling it the alphabet soup because that's what it looks like with all the ions and things out there. It puts all those together. As the Calvin cycle runs, it creates this 3-carbon, 1-phosphate chain. And once it gets a couple of those, it jams those together, and there's our glucose. And the glucose comes off and is now able to be used by the cell. Now, where does the Calvin cycle get the carbon dioxide? Well, the carbon dioxide comes into the cell from the atmosphere. The water comes into the cell through the plant's roots and stuff like that, goes up, but the carbon dioxide comes in through an organ on the leaves. You can see it sometimes if you like a magnifying glass on some leaves. It's called the stomata, which is a very fun word to say, stomata. And the carbon dioxide comes into the cell, carbon dioxide to oxygen, and those get made into partially used up in the phosphates and the sugars, and that's where sugar's not just carbon. So it has, because carbon dioxide has 1 carbon, we need 6 carbons to go out. The Calvin cycle, I guess this is the main point. Roll with me on this. The Calvin cycle goes around 6 times to create one sugar. Now the Calvin cycle starts with a 5-carbon chain, and then it jams one of the carbons from the carbon dioxide, so we have a 6-carbon chain, and then that chain breaks into 2 parts, and then the 2 parts go down, and a lot of energy is used to put it back into a 5-carbon chain and add 1 chain to what will become the 6-carbon sugar. So that is, in a very quick-paced explanation of photosynthesis. Light and water come into the light reaction. Out in the vegetable soup, we have ADP and P and NADP positive. All those guys go into the light reaction. The light reaction says, come here, water, break you off, boom, get out of here, oxygen. Sends the other pieces back out in the alphabet soup. The Calvin cycle's over there running, looking for pieces. The Calvin cycle grabs the ATP, the NADPH, grabs some carbon dioxide that came through the stomata, spins around, kicks out a 6-carbon glucose monomer, a 6-carbon monomer for cellulose and starches and all those things like that. So because the byproduct of oxygen and the product of sugar, I'm going back, most important, they leave, at least for this video, they leave. Roll with me on this. So we're gonna keep going. At least for this video, most important part of biology, photosynthesis, that's it. I know I went fast. I know I took some liberties with the science, trying to make it approachable. Hope you enjoyed it. Please click the like button, subscribe to the channel, sign up for notifications. Leave me a comment, question, or suggestion. That's all for this episode. I will see you in the next one. I don't have any pins to flip. Let's see, here we go.